Over the course of his illustrious Formula One career, Lewis Hamilton has navigated and adapted to numerous radical regulatory revolutions, each bringing its own unique challenges and learning curves. However, in his considered opinion, the ground effect era, which has dominated the Formula One landscape over the past few seasons, will remain the most physically and technically demanding period he has ever experienced. These cars were excessively stiff, prone to violent porpoising, and prone to bottoming out in high-speed corners, all of which placed tremendous strain on his body and required substantial adaptations to his precise driving style. Notably, Lewis Hamilton is not alone in this assessment. Several other drivers have expressed similar sentiments regarding the difficulties posed by this generation of machines. Throughout his remarkable career, Lewis Hamilton has become the most successful Formula One driver of all time, matching Michael Schumacher with 7 World Championship titles and surpassing the century mark in race victories with over 100 Grand Prix wins. These extraordinary achievements are widely recognized and celebrated, yet Lewis Hamilton has also had the unique distinction of competing across an unparalleled number of regulatory transitions in his 19 seasons at the pinnacle of motorsport. Each set of changes required adaptation, resilience, and meticulous study of technical regulations. Yet the upcoming 2026 season promises one of the most significant revolutions in the history of Formula One. The previous major regulatory transformation, the introduction of the ground effect cars, provoked deep divisions across the Formula One paddock. Opinions were strongly contrasting, with some drivers praising the increased aerodynamic performance, while others criticized the extreme physical demands. However, one point was nearly universally agreed upon: the impossibility of sustaining peak performance over an entire season with cars that were so stiff, low to the ground, and physically punishing. Consequently, although there is no universal excitement among drivers for the forthcoming 2026 regulation changes, which will see cars running with lower downforce and simpler aerodynamic profiles, the departure of this highly challenging ground effect generation has been welcomed with a broad sense of relief among most drivers, including Lewis Hamilton. The regulatory transition that arrives in 2026 brings Lewis Hamilton's thoughts back to an earlier era, specifically the 2009 Formula One season. At that time, the sport underwent a significant reduction in aerodynamic downforce, accompanied by the simplification of the cars, all in an effort to limit the negative effects of turbulent air. Nevertheless, teams were quick to identify and exploit gray areas within the new regulations, creating an environment in which even the most dominant and traditionally well-prepared teams suddenly found themselves forced into a competitive chase. Reflecting on that period, Lewis Hamilton recalled that during his time with McLaren in 2009, the team informed him that the new rules required a 50% reduction in aerodynamic downforce. In response, McLaren engineered the car to precisely achieve this 50% target. By January, they claimed to have already reached their intended objectives. However, when the first pre-season test took place, the car had virtually no effective downforce, leaving them significantly behind in performance. The Briton emphasized that this early setback, although frustrating, taught him valuable lessons about car behavior, adaptability, and the interpretation of regulatory frameworks. He also recalled the 2014 season, describing it as an incredibly exciting time because he had joined a new team and could witness firsthand the immense technical development achieved over the preceding 2 years, particularly in terms of the power unit's performance. Lewis also noted that 2017 had been an enjoyable year because the cars were physically larger, wider, and generated more downforce, which in turn allowed for greater stability and predictable handling characteristics. Nevertheless, when reflecting on the ground effect generation of cars in the 2022-2025 period, Lewis Hamilton stated that, in his personal opinion, this generation was probably the most challenging he had ever encountered. He emphasized that while winning races and championships can compensate for many shortcomings in a set of regulations, the extreme nature of these cars, particularly in terms of physical demands and required adaptations to driving technique, made them exceptionally difficult to manage over a full season. The Ferrari driver's observations regarding the ground effect cars highlighted several aspects that directly conflicted with his natural driving style. The extreme stiffness of the chassis, coupled with modified tire compounds that provided reduced mechanical support, significantly increased the complexity of combined maneuvers, such as braking, while simultaneously turning into a corner. Over time, Lewis Hamilton was forced to modify one of the defining characteristics of his driving approach in order to maintain competitive lap times and manage tire performance effectively. Although this adaptation was ultimately necessary, it reinforced his overall assessment. These cars will not be missed. The Briton also highlighted the ongoing issues with porpoising, a condition where aerodynamic forces cause the car to violently bounce at high speeds, and bottoming, where the car's floor repeatedly strikes the track surface. Despite continuous attempts to mitigate these effects, particularly in 2022 when Mercedes was heavily affected, these problems were never fully resolved. The cumulative effect over multiple races caused physical strain and contributed to a heightened sense of difficulty when driving these ground-effect cars, particularly on high-speed circuits with aggressive curbs or uneven asphalt surfaces. After 4 seasons under these demanding regulations, many drivers have reached a consensus that the extreme physical load imposed by ground-effect cars was unsustainable for long-term performance and driver health. Even Fernando Alonso, one of the most physically robust drivers on the grid, openly admitted to experiencing back problems in recent seasons, illustrating the widespread nature of this issue. Pierre Gasly, reflecting on his own experiences, observed that the only real complaint shared by the drivers was the sheer amount of bouncing inherent in these cars. The necessity to run the vehicles as low as possible to maximize ground effect performance placed a significant strain on the drivers' spines, creating discomfort and fatigue that persisted beyond each race weekend. He welcomed the regulatory changes for 2026 as a positive step that would allow drivers to preserve their physical health and potentially enjoy longer careers in Formula One. This perspective was echoed by rookie Oliver Bearman, who entered Formula One almost exclusively during the ground effect era. The Ferrari Jr. had only tested previous generation vehicles in a limited number of sessions, providing him with a unique viewpoint on the extreme characteristics of the current generation of cars. He described the combination of bouncing, stiff handling, and uncomfortable ride quality as physically and technically challenging. Circuits such as Las Vegas, Mexico, and Qatar exacerbated these difficulties due to their aggressive curbs and high-speed sections. Ollie Bearman explained that the rigidity required to extract maximum performance made it difficult to rest properly after sessions, with persistent back pain and fatigue affecting both practice and race performance. He also noted that the unpredictability of the bouncing could result in a substantial loss of lap time during qualifying, even if the car performed well during practice sessions. Looking ahead to the 2026 regulations, the introduction of a flatter floor and the elimination of complex three-dimensional aerodynamic surfaces means that the extreme ground effect characteristics will no longer dominate the car's behavior. Vehicles will no longer need to run as close to the track surface, reducing the likelihood of porpoising. Additionally, suspension systems will become less rigid, allowing for improved absorption of curbs, bumps, and other irregularities on the circuit. This represents a significant improvement in driver comfort, predictability, and safety. Oliver Bearman also pointed out that the extreme sensitivity of ground effect cars to factors such as ride height, bouncing, track surface, and ambient temperature made it difficult for teams to consistently optimize performance. Even minor variations in these parameters could result in significant differences in lap times between sessions. Teams often struggled to identify a clear and consistent approach to setup, highlighting the challenges faced throughout the ground effect era. Among the least popular aspects of this generation of cars, Lewis Hamilton repeatedly emphasized the difficulties posed by their incompatibility with his driving style. With extremely stiff setups and reduced support from the tires, executing precise maneuvers such as combined braking and turning became increasingly challenging. These technical limitations forced Lewis to adapt one of the hallmark features of his driving technique in order to maintain competitive pace, an adaptation that was technically necessary but reinforced the overall conclusion. These cars, while fascinating in their engineering complexity, were extremely challenging to manage and will not be missed by the 7-time world champion.